The Nabalis cheese. It's a pretty silly concept, but seriously, it's a good flipper. I'll cover all the details in this full review. This is a flipping focused review. I'll have a bunch of various different topics that I will cover, but a lot of those will tie directly into the flipping performance and experience of this balisong. Nabalis did send this balisong to me for the purpose of this video, but of course all thoughts and opinions about this balisong are my own and unfiltered. Let's get into it. The first category I'll start off with today is the design, and with an emphasis on the looks, as that is the standout feature of this balisong. I'll cover how the design impacts grip, durability, flippability, of course, but this I just want to focus on the looks. One important thing to note is while this balisong may look like it was designed as a joke, I most certainly do not think that was the case. I think it was designed to be a competent flipper, but also have the advantage of, looking fun, a little silly, maybe a little goofy, like it's cheese themed, hello. But with the point of that being that it is a good public flipper, as it definitely doesn't look like a knife. And as you can see from the specs, the entire balisong is coated with Teflon, from the blade, handles, to the pivots, Zen pins, everything. And I'll talk more about that later. Just a small thing I wanted to point out, I'm not sure if it's just more noticeable because the blade is white, or if the Teflon coating itself causes it to happen more, but there seems to be a lot of oil that can leak out around the pivots. I noticed actually, like I had something on my hand, I was like, what even is this? And I looked and I saw that the balisong was like leaking oil. Kind of reminded me of the Buffness's old Squiddy Owl, but it hasn't really been too much of an issue. Part of that might be just because I've been putting less oil in it, or it's just more noticeable. Something else to note about the design is that the hardware, while it has the white Teflon coating to match the blade, the extra hardware has yellow Teflon coating, in case you prefer that look. Another little design feature that I'll mention here is the bite handle marker. I have to say, I definitely prefer a more obvious bite handle marker as well when I'm doing a full bite handle chapin. Like, I can definitely feel that it's there, but there's definitely some times where, like that right there, it's really hard to tell. Like I can feel it, but it's definitely a little bit low to where I pointed out in the first impressions, I did a trick where like it hit on my finger and I couldn't feel it at all. If I wasn't looking at it, I wouldn't have known that this was the bite side. Now the bite handle marker may work better for you depending on your finger size, but for me, it's not perfect. But I think it's good enough to where it can help you out if you accidentally do a trick on the wrong side, and it can let you know. Also, something I wanted to mention real quick is the handle gap. This handle gap is a fair bit larger than I would prefer. So there's definitely quite a bit of space between these handles. It doesn't really have an effect on flipping really, but it's just mostly just a personal preference. Next up, I'm gonna cover the grip and comfort. And I wanted to cover this one next because while the Teflon coating definitely adds to that unique look of the balisong, it also contributes heavily to how the balisong feels in the hand. And while you're actually flipping the balisong, I think that how it feels in the hand is the number one standout feature. So I gotta say the grip on this balisong is pretty great. I wasn't sure in my initial impressions, it felt a little slippery, the Teflon coating, but after flipping it and spending a lot more time with it, the Teflon coating is definitely a good choice for adding grip. Now, whether it was because I was just getting used to how the Teflon feels, or maybe I had to break in for a little bit, I definitely have to say that now that I am used to it, it is pretty easy to flip and keep it under control. The Teflon coating performs very well, and one of the things that I really like about it is that it's very comfortable. It's something that I feel a lot of times with balisongs is that grip is kind of at odds with comfort. Take, for example, something like the Squid Trainer. I know a lot of people have said that the Squid Trainer is one of the grippier aluminum balisongs, and I have to agree that it is very grippy. But it's due to largely because of the milling on the faces, and overall the finish is a little bit that of a grippier bead blast. But while this definitely does add a lot of grip, to some this texture just isn't very comfortable. It's definitely true that this grip is slightly abrasive because that's how grip works with aluminum balisongs. Take another one, for example, like the Vulp. While the Vulp is not really known for its grip, I would say in this area right here where the milling is, definitely is nice and grippy. You can do this combo right here and there's plenty of grip to hold on to. However, in my opinion, something that is not talked about a lot, this area, this milling is very sharp. And after a lot of flipping, it can really cause some wear on the fingers. Luckily though, with the Teflon coating on the cheese, you won't have any of those issues. The Teflon coating does feel pretty smooth in the sense that there's no hard lines like on the Vulp that can dig into your fingers in a painful way, nor are there aggressive texturing or milling overall. It's pretty smooth. You really only have these two lines on the faces and then this little faux speed channel and some jimping, which add some extra grip, but it's really just helping out the Teflon coating on the balisong. Now, speaking of the milling that does exist, that center line is nice for, you really do feel it when you do fans, like that reverse fan thing, and if you're gonna pivot the balisong over your thumb and middle finger. And the jimping is pretty good, I think. I think it's the jimping, especially like with any balisong, you really have to dial in how much you are gripping onto the ends of the handle for tricks like ladders, because with ladders, you don't want to grip it too hard because then your hands will climb up the ends of the handles. And of course, gripping it too lightly means that the balisong will fly out of your hands. I think the jimping being a little bit more deep and aggressive could make it easier for those learning ladders. But if you already know how to do ladders, I think just after getting used to this balisong for a little bit, the jimping is more than good enough. Now, for the comfortability of chaplains, it's pretty good. There's definitely some nice rounding on the edges of the spine, although the spine itself is pretty flat. Overall, when you're doing chaplains, it's definitely nice and comfortable, and there's no irritation, which is good. Something else to note about the comfort is the bite handle marker definitely is not painful. I have not gotten injured from it, and I don't think you really would get any bad pinches from it. It's pretty smooth overall, so it's not going to punish you, but it'll just let you know if you mess something up most of the time. Now I'll discuss the balance and the weight. Now, while I wouldn't say that I'm the best at coming up with the precise balance profiles of a balisong, I can just give my experience on how different tricks feel and how things feel overall and what I think about it. So, starting that off, I will say that the spec sheet that Nabalis has says that this has a light handle bias, and while personally, I think I'd probably say maybe like a medium handle bias. I don't know. Light feels too, maybe not enough. It definitely feels like it has more handle bias than just a light handle bias. Although I think part of that also might just be due to how well this thing carries momentum. As you can see, there's a lot of material at the end of the handles, and it even has like that slope down, so there's extra aluminum at the end of the handles, which does translate into this balisong carrying momentum pretty well. And so it really makes it a fun experience if you like doing lots of rollovers and flowy tricks that lead into one another. So yeah, this balisong is really good at chaplains and rollovers because of how well it carries momentum and, like I said, like the handle bias nature of it. And so also, it does not compromise in fanning performance. Fans perform very well on this balisong, as you can see. You know, backhand, palm fans, choker fans. Really like even just like this choker fan to fire starter transfer that I can do. It just flows really well when I can do it properly. I haven't done that one as much recently, but yeah, it really flows really well in different fan tricks. So, and now as for the weight, the specification sheet says that the cheese is 3.98 ounces or 113 grams. And for me, with the things that I'm used to flipping, such as the Volp, the Squid Trainer, and the Canyon, compared to those things, I would say this definitely sits right in like the middle. The cheese definitely feels a little bit weightier, more substantial than the Volp, even though they're very close in weight. And yet it feels a little bit lighter than the Squid Trainer and the Canyon. So it really does sit in this nice middle ground where it's not going to be too light probably, but it's also not going to be on the heavier end. But yeah, I really like the weight of the cheese. And how the weight kind of plays in with the balance is, unlike something like the Canyon or the Squid Trainer, which I know some people don't like how much momentum it carries, and because those are both on the heavier side, they can definitely be more fatiguing for people and whatnot. The cheese, because it carries momentum well, but at the same time is not as heavy, it definitely feels like it sits in this nice middle ground where you can flip it, whether you're doing flowy tricks or if you're doing tricks that have a lot of ricochets in them, like with the Kiss Goodbye. The cheese allows you to flip whatever style you want to without, I guess, being overly fatiguing or whatnot. It really does sit in that nice middle ground with momentum carrying and its weight. Next up, let's talk about durability, tolerances, tuning, and sound. So starting with durability, which I think is pretty important because of the Teflon coating, because the Teflon coating definitely has an impact on the durability. Of course, the full thing is Teflon coated, but underneath that, you have 6061 aluminum handles and a 420 heat-treated blade. Now, this is pretty thin here, but it is a heat-treated blade, so hopefully if it would survive any drops and it wouldn't snap or anything. Obviously, I cannot speak to any long-term durability, as I've only had this thing for about a week, and I also have not done any intentional durability testing. That being said, the aluminum handles, the steel blade, should be more than good enough to hold up against long-term flipping. There's definitely plenty of handle gap, as I mentioned earlier, and the Zen pins are also pretty thick, so I would not be worried about the handle gap diminishing anytime soon. That being said, I think often when people are worried about durability, Balisongs, they are speaking of cosmetic durabilities, in which case the cheese is definitely not in a good spot for that. That is because the Teflon coating is not durable. It's definitely less durable than a normal anodization would be, while a normal anodization actually increases the Balisong's durability because I believe it is harder to scratch and whatnot than aluminum itself. This coating is definitely easier to scratch than even regular aluminum would be. And as you can see, there's already some little scratches on the ends of the handles where I've already dropped it. I think on like the metal of my desk, it's kind of scraped off that. And it's pretty small, but you can see like the shiny metal poking through, which isn't ideal, but it's also to be expected with any Balisong, such as my Volp, which has plenty of little dings and scratches on the bottom of the handles. Then again, I've had that for over 2 years, as opposed to this has been a week. Definitely something to consider. Also, there is a ding on the bottom of the handle, which made an indent into the metal and the coating, but it has not scratched through. So that's just interesting. It's not that this coating is entirely weak and can't stand up to anything. It's just that you're just going to want to be careful with it because it will come off. And that is also because this Balisong is entirely coated, which includes the blade and the pins and whatnot. And of course, that makes contact all the time. And as you can see, after just 1 week, there's clear marks where the Teflon coating has come off the blade itself and the Zen pins. And you can see in the Zen cups as well, it has come off, which is to just be expected, obviously, unless you never flip this, which would be the point of that. Something I do think is very important to note is while this Balisong has been marketed to be, like, a good public flipper option, which I think is definitely the case due to its looks. However, if you like how the appearance looks and you want to keep the Teflon coating as pristine as you can, perhaps taking it around in public is not the best option. Simply because if you are in public, you're going to be flipping probably over concrete, or even not. Even if you're flipping over grass or whatnot, anywhere outside, there's a chance there could be a rock or stick or something hard that could scrape off the coating if you drop the Balisong. Now, I can only imagine if this thing was to take a full hit on the concrete, it would not go well. You'd probably have scrapes all over the handles and the blade, and maybe not after the first drop, but for sure if you drop it repeatedly on concrete, it would look pretty brutal, which personally is why I wouldn't take this thing outside and I'm just going to flip it over soft things like carpet instead. I would just take my Canyon out if I was going to go outside because this thing is very durable. Now, as for the cheese, you're just going to want to be careful with that Teflon coating. Now, as for the tolerances, they seem to be holding up pretty well. As you can see, there's just a little bit of play. There's still no tap. Although the channel isn't the biggest, and as you can see, the blade is getting really close to hitting the edges when I really push on it. So I'm curious to see how it holds up in the longer term and if that will develop any blade rub, like where it comes in and hits on the side. Because that would be really unfortunate because that would for sure lead to removal of the Teflon coating on both the blade and the handle, which would not look very good. So only really time can tell, but we will see. But out of the box, the tuning was really good and the tolerances were nice and tight. And so that's really good to see in what I think will be like a $80-ish Balisong. So glad to see that from Nabalis. Now, as for the tuning itself, I have not tuned this. I can't really speak on to how that process would look. And I have not even taken it apart. I wanted to because I was going to swap out the hardware to actually get to experience the fully yellow handles. But I'm pretty sure the pivots were Loctited because when I was trying to unscrew it, it did not want to budge. So I figured I'll just leave it as it is. I don't want to mess up the tune or whatnot. Or also strip off like the Teflon coating inside the pivots. Now, as for the sound, but yeah, so this has been somewhat recently oiled. I didn't just oil it, but I feel like sound doesn't change a ton between oil and not oil. But anyway, I would say that the sound overall, but yeah, I think it sounds cool. It sounds a little bit more unique than anything else really that I have in my collection, which makes sense because of the Teflon coating. Lastly, I just want to cover 3 smaller categories right before I kind of sum everything up with my final recommendations and how I overall feel about this Balisong. As for the unboxing experience and some accessories that the cheese comes with, you have pretty standard affair from Nabalis nowadays, the Create with Nabalis case, pretty cool. Then opening that up, you have the T10 Torx driver with like the pivot needle kind of thing, which is really helpful and handy to have. And then you have a box of extra hardware. And this comes with washers, bushings, and pivots and screws, which are Teflon coated in yellow, which is cool. Now mine did not come with lube or Loctite. Not sure if you have the option for that. I know sometimes Nabalis gives you the option if you want faster shipping without them, or wait a few more days to get those as well. And another thing I wanted to touch on is the availability, and just mention that. Now, I really don't know what the availability will be, but based on everything else that Nabalis has released, the availability should be very good. Nabalis keeps their products well stocked, and they have great, I think, worldwide shipping, or at least I know they can ship to a lot of places outside the US, which makes sense because they're not based in the US. And yeah, that's just really cool to be able to have access to so many Balisongs so many places around the world. And lastly, like I mentioned, for the price, I don't exactly know what it is, but I think it's going to be somewhere around $80, which will be interesting as the Teflon Vulp is $75. These two will be pretty close in price. I do have one coming on the way that I'll also be making some videos, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on the videos that I will be making about the Teflon Vulp and comparing it to the Nabalis cheese and whatnot. But that being said, I think the cheese on its own being around $80, I do just want to emphasize that while I know some people might think that it looks like it's kind of just a silly project and maybe it is a joke, I just want to say that this thing most certainly does not flip like a joke. I think it's definitely can be considered to be competitive with a lot of other offerings in that price range, though obviously the Orion V1.5 definitely makes that category a little bit harder to judge. But for sure, I think the cheese is definitely a valid option. Now, as for my overall thoughts and recommendations I like the design. I think the fun idea of making a cheese-themed Balisong, when I first saw it about 10 months ago, I think, when they unveiled it on Instagram, I really do like the fun personality that it has in that sense. But on top of all of that, my two standout features that I like about this Balisong are I like the Teflon coating and the grip that it provides. It's both functional, it's very grippy, and it's comfortable. It definitely adds a uniqueness to my collection that nothing else yet can. So there's that. Plus, when you combine all of that with just the weight and balance where it sits in that area and how it combines just the performance of just doing really well in fans as well as chaplains, especially, and rollovers, I have to say it really just overall makes this just a fun and competent, unique flipper that I think fits really well in my collection, and I think could also potentially fit well into your collection. So would I recommend this Balisong? I would say if you have the money to spend on this Balisong and you like the look of it, I would say for sure, then it's definitely an easy one to pick up, because there's not that many like fun, goofy Balisongs in that sense where you have like the bright colors and the cheesy design. So that's an easy recommendation. Now, if you're somebody that maybe doesn't have as many Balisongs, right? You're like, maybe you flipped a friend's, or you maybe have like a CCC, something really cheap, and you're looking to upgrade, I think this could be a decent option for sure. Once again, if you like how it looks, then honestly, I think that's a great reason to go for it. But I have to say, I feel like I cannot recommend an $80 Balisong, of course, without mentioning the Orion 1.5. Now, I have not flipped one, but like literally everyone that I've ever heard talk about that Balisong says that it is amazing and could cost like twice the price and would still be worth the money. So obviously with that, the availability is probably the deciding factor, because it is not very available, and something like the cheese should be pretty available. But overall, I think this could be honestly a fantastic first Balisong to learn with and flip with, or it could be something that you upgrade to if you just maybe have something a little bit cheaper. That all being said, I think the information in the rest of the review should be enough to help you decide on whether this Balisong could be for you. If you have any other questions, I can do my best to answer them in the comments. Thank you for watching this. If you made this far, I mean, come on. You just gotta drop a cheese emoji in your comment to let me know that you made it this far. But also throw in something that's random and crazy, because a cheese emoji is too obvious. But, I mean, come on, it's a cheese. And finally, if you are hungry for more content on the cheese Balisong, you can check out this playlist here.